Hi guys, welcome back to Scalemotor. Today we're on to part 5 of our Tamiya CBR1000RR-R. We're going to be focusing on the forks. We're using the Tamiya fork set. We'll also be doing the wheels, the brakes, the handlebars. We've got the airbox to do and the front lights. All I'm doing here is just snipping the bits off the sprue and getting rid of the bits of plastic which are left from where the parts are connected to the sprue. I'm not going to show me sanding and filing the parts just because I've covered that in other videos and I don't think everybody wants to see me sanding for 20 minutes in every video. We're also going to be working on the front fender. We're going to be using some Tamiya extra thin just to glue the two pieces of the fender together. We're going to do, like I've mentioned in other videos, we're just going to hold it together, run some of the extra thin along the seam where it joins, and the capillary action will take that glue into the gaps and it'll start to bond. You're going to then give it a little push just to squeeze it together, and you'll get a bead of molten plastic come out of the join. And later on then we can go in with sanders and we'll just sand that away and try and get a nice smooth uniform finish. It doesn't matter too much as we're going to be using carbon fibre decals, but if there is a big seam, a deep seam still there, it will be visible through the decals once you're done, and it'll always be visible through the paint. So we're just going to try and get rid of it as best we can, just as a sort of insurance for when we do put the decals on. So now we're just going to come in with our UMP sanding sticks. I'm using the 240, this is my favourite out of the bunch, and what we'll be doing is just getting there pretty rough just to get rid of that ridge of plastic along the middle. Once that's gone, we can feel it with a thumbnail. Once we've dealt with that, we'll hit it with the buffing sticks. It'll be the blue side first and then the white side like usual, and you should, if it's bonded really well, you may not even be able to see the seam. Don't worry too much if you can still see it, as long as you can run your thumbnail or fingernail over it and not feel the ridge, you should be fine. Next up, we're going to be doing some priming, and again I'm using the UMP white primer. I'm using this because I'm going to be doing a gloss black base for the metallics, and I like to see the black going down. We're going to start off as usual with a nice thin dusty coat over the parts. We just want to make sure we get into all the corners and the dips and the recesses, just to make sure we have primed everywhere. And then we'll come back with two more coats of the primer, just so we do get a nice full coverage on the part. And unlike the previous videos, I've actually managed to capture me painting the gloss black base. We're going to be using LP1, which is a lovely glossy paint. It's thinned about 50-50 to start with, and then I thin a bit more, going up to about 70% thinner, just to give it that kind of milky consistency in the paint cup. And then I go over with a nice thin coat to start off with, same as with the primer, and then once that's dry we'll go in with thicker coats then. Because it's a gloss paint, it does like to be put on a little bit thicker just to give it that nice glossy appearance. So the third coat I'd suggest doing thicker than the previous two. So now we've got that gloss black base done, we're going to come in with the metallics. First up, I'm using alcad chrome. It's one of my favourites. I'm going to be using it for quite a few things up front, from the fork bottoms to the clip-ons to the triple trees and various other little bits. I'm also going to be using it for the brake discs. I've never painted road bike brake discs. Every road bike I've made before this, I've been using photoetch details, and the brake discs I have actually painted have been on MotoGP bikes, and they use carbon ceramic discs, so they are not shiny, and I've got a carbon ceramic paint for those discs. But with the road bike, the discs are steel and they're very, very shiny, so I've decided to use the alcad chrome just to try and get that sheen. I don't think it looks too bad. However, as I've never painted the road bike discs before, I don't have a kind of good colour in mind, so I'd like if you guys could give me some feedback. Just let me know how the discs look, or if you have a favourite paint for painting road bike discs, let me know and I can use it on my next video build. So we're just painting the alcad as we usually would, thin coats at low pressure, building up the coats, and you'll see the characteristics of the metal finish change with each coat. I suggest giving it 5 to 10 minutes after you're done painting before deciding that you've got your final finish, because whilst drying, alcad will look different to how it does when it's actually dried. Next up, we're going to be using alcad gold titanium. We're going to be using this for the front calipers. It's going to be applied the same way we would apply the chrome, so thin layers at a lower pressure, build it up slowly, and once you're done, it gives a very, very lovely kind of shiny gold colour, which is perfect for calipers. So next up, we're painting our top yoke, and this is the top part of the triple tree where you'd normally put the key and where the forks go through right at the top. The colour I'm using for this is a mixture of metallic brown and I believe it's titanium silver. I can't remember the ratio, but I made this when I was building the RC213V, because this kind of metallic chocolatey colour is what the top yoke is on the GP bike. So now I'm going in and clear coating our wheels. I'm using X22, which is a clear acrylic from Tamiya. I think it does the job. I've yet to try any 2K, but I think I will be trying 2K on the fairings for this bike. However, this I've just thinned 50-50 with the Tamiya lacquer thinner with retarder, and I think in total I give it 3 coats. Again, a nice thin kind of tack coat to start off with, and then progressively thicker coats up until the last coat to get that nice glossy finish. I was able to get the wheels the colour I wanted by going back. I just added a bit of thinner to the leftover paint I had from the Repsol set, and I was able to get enough to finish the wheels. Next up, we're going to be masking up the glass on the front lights. This little mask set comes with the Tamiya kit. It's not pre-cut, unfortunately, so you do have to cut it out. I'd suggest using a fresh blade because you want nice clean edges, otherwise it's not going to mask very well. So once we've got it cut out, all we're going to do is we're going to peel it off the backing, and we're going to just stick it to the front of the headlight glass. There are indentations and notches which are on the mask sheet, which we're going to cut out to help the masking tape conform around the edges and the corners. There's a little protrusion on the front glass which is what needs to be masked off, and that's going to sit into the gaps in the nose cone. So we're just going to pop the masking tape on, and then we're going to go ahead and paint. To mount the glass for painting, all we're going to do is snip the pointy bit off the end of a cocktail stick so it's nice and flat, get a tiny bit of CA glue on the end of the cocktail stick, and then we're just going to hold that on the very edge of the glass for the headlight. This isn't going to be seen when the model is done, and it's going to be painted over, so if we do get a bit of frosting or any ill effects from the CA glue, it's nothing to worry about. So we're just going to use the Tamiya XF1 flat black, and we're just going to paint one side of this because obviously only one side is masked. We're going to try our very best not to get any paint on the other side. If we do though, it's not much of a problem because as you'll see later on, we'll just be grabbing a cotton bud, dipping that in our X20A acrylic thinner, and then we can wipe any speckles off from the backside. And you don't have to be careful when you're wiping it off because obviously the inside hasn't been painted and we are literally just trying to get rid of whatever paint is there. Okay, and once all that's painted, we're just going to peel away the masking tape, revealing our nice lovely clear glass. Although mine wasn't lovely and clear because I did manage to get paint on the back side. But not a problem, here we will be grabbing a cotton bud, dipping it in our acrylic thinner and just wiping away any residual paint from the back. Now we're just going to be grabbing our Pilot silver marker again. We're going to use this to get the bolt heads on the back of the lights. These bolts are going to be mounting points and also where the adjustment screws are for the headlight angle. And now that's done, all is left is to assemble the front headlight unit. There were only a few parts, and they were all painted flat black. There were a couple of glass parts which I hadn't cut off previously, but these are going to be CA glued in, and we're only going to use a tiny bit because we want it to hold, but we don't want it to frost. It's not really going to matter too much if we do get a bit of frosting on these parts, because you have to really be looking for it to spot it because it's inside the headlight unit. But these were a bit of a nightmare to put on. They are handed, but it's not immediately apparent which side they go on. So there was a bit of fiddling, which you'll probably see in the background. But once they're on, it was super simple. Then these plastic bits just pop into the headlight surround, and then the headlight glass pops on, and this is what you're left with. Next up, we're going to be painting the letters on the caliper. I'm using some Humbrol enamel. It's a gloss red. It's the only enamel I had on hand. So all we're going to be doing is dipping our paintbrush in the paint, and we're going to be filling the letters on the calipers. It doesn't matter if you're not very accurate. It doesn't matter if you go outside the lines. All we need to do is make sure that those letters are filled with the paint. And once it's dried, we're going to come back with a bit of enamel thinner and just rub away any excess. Okay, so while we leave that enamel paint dry for about 4 to 6 years, we're going to be using the Tamiya LP61 metallic grey. We're going to be using this to paint the master cylinder for the front brakes on the right handlebar, and on the left hand side we're going to be using it for the part of the clutch lever which connects the lever to the clip-ons. Okay, so now once we've painted that, we're going to be using the Pilot Silver Marker again. This time, just because there's some quite delicate small things we're going to be painting, I'm going to just press it down on a piece of paper a few times, just so it bleeds into a nice little puddle, and then I'm going to use the brush to apply it. We're going to be using this for the adjusters on the clutch cable. We're also going to be using it for the bolts which connect the levers to the master cylinder, and we'll also use it for the brake actuator, shall we say, which is just a little metal piece which actually activates the hydraulic motion of the brakes when you pull the lever. Okay, so now that the enamel paint is dried, we're going to be using a fine pointed Tamiya cotton bud and just using a little tiny bit of lighter fluid on the end. You can use enamel thinner or mineral spirits if you wish, but you don't want to cover the cotton bud with your thinner because you only want a little bit, and what we're going to do is we're going to gently rub over the letters on the caliper, and what this will do is it'll remove any excess without removing the paint from the recessed letters. Next up, we're going to be using some Tamiya X18 semi-gloss black just to paint the disc carriers. And this is just a piece of metal which connects to the hub on the wheel, and then the actual brake disc connects around this. The reason I didn't mask them off is because where the disc actually connects to the carrier, there's rivets, and these are there so that the disc can actually move independently of the carrier. These rivets are normally a stainless steel or a nice kind of shiny finish metal. So I wanted to leave them, and I thought it'd be a bit of a nightmare masking those off too. Also, I wanted to keep the chrome finish on the bolts and the ABS sensor ring on the left hand side disc, so I opted to brush paint instead. So we've got the front fender all stuck together, sanded, painted in matte black, and what we're going to do now is we're just going to make some carbon fibre templates for the front fender. I decided to make the template as one piece, and then what I was going to do is I was going to cut the template into little bits to make it easier to apply. So all I'm doing is just covering the part with the masking tape, and then I'm going to use a small scissors to cut around the edges of the part just so we've got the shape in the masking tape. And then once we've got the shape we need, we're just going to pop it down onto a carbon fibre decal sheet. Again, this is the Tamiya decals we're using. So what I've opted to do here is, rather than cut it into various little bits, I've decided to just do it in 2 pieces, which will connect along the middle. So I've cut a line down the middle of the template, and then I'm just going to cut around this. Once I've cut out half, I'm going to pick it off, flip it over, and then use that as a template to cut out the other half. You can see I've got 2 other little bits of masking tape there, and I used these to make carbon fibre decals for the clock bracket, or the clock, the heads up display, and the front sprocket cover. So next up, we actually have to place the decal. So I'm going to be using microset to get the decal in position, and then the microsol will be applied over the decal to soften it, to get it to conform to the shape of the part. Much like we've done in previous videos, we're going to leave the decal in the warm water for 30 seconds to a minute, pull it out, give it a little push just to see if it's moving, and it's moving fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it off with the tweezers, lay it onto the part, get it exactly where we need to go, and then we're going to pop some of the microsol on top and leave it for 5 minutes, and just repeat the process, pushing out any air bubbles or pushing the decal into crevices and corners, just to make sure we get a nice smooth coverage. I do apologize, I didn't get much footage of this. However, if you do want to see a video of me doing carbon fibre decaling, let me know and I can dedicate a video just to that. So next up, we're going to start putting everything together. Here we've got the anodized metal bits from the Tamiya front fork set. The front fork set is something I would suggest whatever motorbike kit you're doing. Tamiya, I believe, do one for the majority of their bike kits. If you can find one, snap it up, because it is a super simple way to add a lot more realism to the model. You can paint the plastic ones you get with the kit. They can look great, however the front fork sets come with metal parts and they just look so much better in my opinion. So putting them together again is super simple. You get your painted fork bottoms, which are the only thing you need to paint for the fork set, and you just slide over the sleeve, which is the lighter colour, and this is going to be the stanchion of the actual fork. Then you pop on the black ring. This is going to act as the fork seal, which can be a nightmare to paint. Then next is a poly cap, and then you put the outer fork tube over the top, and the poly cap should hold it on snug. And if you do need to take it apart, it should just pull straight off with a little wiggle. Once we've got this one built up, we're going to do exactly the same on the other side, and then we're going to move on to the fork tops. The fork tops are various different parts, and looking at it first in the packet can seem a bit daunting. It comes with a little instructions which shows you how to put it together. So essentially all you do is you do a gold ring, then the silver ring, and then the blue ring. The fork tops are where you would make adjustments to your suspension settings, so like spring preload and rebound. The newer bikes like this one will have electronically controlled forks and suspension, and that's what the little plastic plugs you get with the fork set are, and they just glue into the top. So the way it goes is you start off with a gold ring, and this is meant to simulate the very top of the fork. Then the silver ring, which is normally a cap on the fork to stop obviously all the fork oil spewing out when you go over a bump. And then you get a blue anodized blue bit of metal, and this is meant to simulate the adjustment bolt on top. They glue together, super simple, with a dab of CA, and then they stick to the top of the yoke. There's also another gold ring which comes with the fork set, which goes on the underside of the yoke, and this is there just to simulate a gap in between the actual clip-on and the top yoke. The gold ring is the same colour as the majority of the fork, so once it's all together it does look like the fork goes all the way up and through the top yoke. So once we've got those fork tops done, it's just a matter of connecting the forks to the yokes. The bottom yoke connects to the forks easy enough. There's two locating points and two holes which line up, and then the top one just slips on top and it's connected with a screw. There's no need to glue anything, and I wouldn't at this point, because you're going to need to take that top yoke off when you're going to connect it to the bike. I just like screwing it on first, just because it's easier to get the wheels and everything on. And you can see here under the light that fork set looks amazing. So next up, we're just building up the front end, and the first step was attaching the discs to the front wheel. It's easy to do and it's hard to get wrong because each disc can only go on a specific side. There's 5 locating points on one disc and 3 locating points on the other. So we've just put a dab of CA glue on the locating points on the wheel, and then just pop the disc on top and you should be good to go. Next we've got the screw for the axle, and it's just a case of sliding the wheel into the forks, lining up the holes and just popping the screw through. This is not a hard part. I would suggest just being careful, because with the metal parts it is quite easy to scratch your paintwork, and if you scratch your disc at this point, it's going to be a nightmare to take that off and repaint. So here we are just working on the airbox. It's a simple 3-piece construction. It was painted in just XF1 matte black, and then it's simple to put on. There's 2 locating points on the throttle bodies, just a dab of CA glue, and then we pop the bottom of the airbox on. There's a sensor which is painted in semi-gloss black, which is X18, and that's going to connect to the top of the airbox. And then to connect the top to the bottom of the airbox, it's just a couple of dabs of CA glue around the edge, and then you can pop that straight on. What I'm using here is the Pilot Silver Pen just to get the bolt heads on that sensor. Again, this is not going to be seen, but it is nice to do. So next we're just painting up what I believe to be the ECU, which is on top of the airbox. There's not much to paint on here. It was painted in flat black, like the manual calls out for, but I'm just using the Tamiya XF16 flat aluminium just to give it a little bit of visual interest. There's a bar going across the top which holds the ECU down. I've painted that, and I've also painted 1 or 2 of the electrical connectors. So now we're just getting the wire for the throttle cables. So it's called out in the manual as 100mm, and the kit does come with a thin gauge wire. It's easy to connect. You just fold it in half, and there's a little connector point on the underneath of the part we've just been painted, which it wraps around. I've put a dab of CA glue in there. I'm not sure you need to, because it will be held down when you glue on this connector piece which we've just been painting. The wire then comes up along the side of the airbox and goes through the forks, and then it tucks into a little gap on the right hand controls. So once that's done, all we're going to do is grab the silver pilot marker again, and we're just going to go around and look for any bolt heads we may have missed or rubbed off. I'm also getting the bolt heads on the front sprocket cover, which we covered with a carbon fibre decal earlier. Once that was done, there was a little bit of piping to do, and that was just for the front brakes. There's a connector block on the back of the fender and a connector block on top of the radiator. There's quite a few pipes because the bike has ABS, and I didn't really get very good footage of me putting the pipes on, just because they were also small and also close together. However, the manual does cover it brilliantly. And with that, that's me done for this part. I've thoroughly enjoyed building the front end of this. I love the Tamiya fork sets, and if you've enjoyed as much as I have, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. But in the meantime, have a great day and stay safe.